So the Raiders, at the end of the day, end up getting their guys, a high-ranking executive named Dave Ziegler from the New England Patriots, who's going to be their new general manager. And they're taking another Patriot man to be their head coach, and Josh McDaniels. McDaniels has been the offensive coordinator for New England for almost a decade at this point. He was with them in the early 2000s, 2006, 2007, 2008. And then he had that 2-year run as a head coach for the Denver Broncos. We all know that was probably too much too soon for him, and he just never worked out there. Gone after 2 years, but was with the Rams for 1 year as an offensive coordinator, and then came back to New England in 2012. Has been there ever since. They've had a lot of success with him. Obviously, there was a drop-off in 2020 when they had Cam Newton at quarterback, so they had to change a lot of what they wanted to do with the offense. But they get Mac Jones this year, and things really turn around. The offense is not perfect, no, but not by any means. They have a lot of issues. Mac Jones is not a perfect quarterback by any means. He had some bad games. But overall, the offense looked much more like what it looked like in the past before Tom Brady's departure. So you have the sense of belief that McDaniels can succeed without Tom Brady at quarterback as an offensive coordinator. He's going to join the Raiders, who have Derek Carr on a cost-effective deal currently. I expect Derek Carr will stick around with this new duo. There have been some thoughts they would trade him. I think he'll stick around because, one, he's better than any quarterback in this upcoming draft class. And two, I think he has all the skill sets that would fit well in a Josh McDaniels style offense. He's not going to turn the ball over very much. Fumbling's been an issue for him. Fumbling could be a problem, but in terms of the interceptions, he won't do that. He'll complete a high percentage of passes. You have Darren Waller, who's obviously a very attractive target. You have Hunter Renfrow, who is kind of like the typical New England Patriot dude who just gets open, and he's probably going to be one of the top 5 or 6 pure slot receivers in the NFL going forward. Will really get close to, I would imagine, somewhere between the 800 to 1,100 yard mark, probably for the next 4 or 5 years of his career consistently. So long as they have a good quarterback there in Las Vegas, which they do in Derek Carr. Derek Carr is a guy who's probably constantly ranked somewhere between number 9 and number 13 in terms of the quarterback rankings in the NFL. So a solid quarterback. Maybe not like the championship caliber guy you want per se, but still a very solid quarterback you can win games with. The big difference between Las Vegas and New England that McDaniels and Ziegler are going to have to address is going to be the offensive line. In New England, you have a bunch of guys who are just built to run the ball and just built to move guys up the line of scrimmage, create holes for Damian Harris, create holes for Ramondre Stevenson, and they have done that for years. That's why you can rotate some of your running backs through that Patriots backfield over the time and still get production. I still have Brandon Bolden out there doing work, even though he's been there a couple of times at different points in his career, while you have Garrett Blunt, who runs for 17 touchdowns in a year, Rex Burkhead. You have all these guys, Stephen Ridley, and Jarvis Green-Ellis. All these guys come to the Patriots and have success over time because you have the offensive line to do it. And the Raiders don't have that. They have that power back in Josh Jacobs right now, but they do not have the offensive line to move guys off the ball. They have Colton Miller, who's a piece that you can definitely build around a left tackle. Other than him, though, I don't feel very comfortable with anyone along that offensive line. And yes, Alex Leatherwood was a high-level investment last year by the previous regime, a former first-round pick. But if I'm Ziegler and McDaniels, I'm not guaranteeing him a starting role or any role in this team going forward, because you have to reevaluate the guys from the previous regime and see how you can change things once you get there. The offensive line, clearly, is not working out so far for the Raiders. I think for McDaniels, if he wants to run his style of offense, you have Waller, you got Renfrow. You're going to need to overhaul the receiver position a little bit in terms of the outside receivers. You'll need to make changes there. But you have 2 really good pass catchers to start with. You have a solid running back in Josh Jacobs who has that power style to his game. What you're missing is your offensive line. So I expect that to be what they're going to try to address first for this team going forward. The defense has problems as well. They do have solid edge rushers. They have improved that cornerback room a little bit. They have a variety of players at safety and linebacker that are kind of mismatched a little bit in that defensive front, and they're a little bit thin in terms of the interior defensive line. So a lot of positions they have to address there on that defense. But I expect from McDaniels and his style and his background, he's going to focus heavily on fixing that offensive line first to make sure he can run his style of offense and then transition to working on the defensive front. That's what I expect him to focus on this offseason, really overhauling that offense and trying to get some stability up front for Derek Carr and making sure McDaniels can run his scheme the way he wants to. Everything else going forward, I think we'll see a lot of guys who are Mike Mayock and John Gruden draft picks. And I say both those guys because we know Gruden had a lot of final say on the draft selections and on the roster. I expect a lot of those guys, like Cleveland Ferrell, unfortunately, as a Clemson guy, I hate to say this, but he's probably going to be gone sooner rather than later. Trayvon Mullen's been good when healthy. Been solid when healthy. I shouldn't say necessarily good, but solid when healthy. Also a Clemson guy. Was hurt a lot this past year. I don't know how long he'll be with that organization. Probably not too much longer. I think they're going to focus on dumping a lot of the bad contracts that they give out to guys like Corey Littleton. I don't think that'll stick around very long. Jonathan Abram at safety probably won't be on that team much longer. And he was a player they drafted, I believe, or at least was drafted maybe prior to the Gruden regime, but right around that time period when they took over. And then, like I already mentioned, Alex Leatherwood could potentially be gone. We'll see how that works out. But I imagine a lot of those draft picks will be moving on, unfortunately, because a lot of them just don't fit with the team right now. They don't have good roles. They didn't have great roles this past year. And I think they'll try to overhaul that by bringing in their own kind of guys. Now, I did see this from Tom Pelissero when he was tweeting out this information. He said the Patriot way is coming to Las Vegas. And that phrase to me stuck out so much because the Patriot way coming to Las Vegas sounds like the perfect way to introduce everything going wrong in Las Vegas, because the Patriot way just has not worked many other places. And it has not worked when you get New England-style guys in Miami with Brian Flores. There's a clash between him and the front office on Tua, and it doesn't work out. He ends up coaching really well and having a really good time in Miami, but ends up getting fired without having ever made the playoffs. Someone like Joe Judge in New York is supposed to be like that disciplinarian kind of guy, gets fired after 2 years. You know, like a lot of the guys coming off the Bill Belichick tree have not had massive success everywhere else because they can't necessarily bring that style of leadership to a team where they don't have the credentials to do so. And they also have not been able to put the organization in a premier position to rebuild quickly. Now, I think the Raiders already have a handful of very good assets, guys like Max Crosby, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Derek Carr, to build around. So I think that's different than situations like in Miami when Brian Flores took over. They really didn't have much of anything. The Giants still don't have a lot to build around right now. So I think that'll be different. But in the same sense, saying that the Patriot way is coming to Las Vegas, it does worry me a little bit because I could see it going wrong for the Raiders very quickly because the Patriot way has not worked outside of New England very often. So there is some concern in that they're going to try to be too much like the Patriots, and that this organization and the ownership are trying to mirror New England far too much and trying to dig into being like the next Patriots in some sense, trying to mirror what they did there. I am worried that it's too much focused on being the New England Patriots and not focused enough on building this own identity for the Raiders and trying to be a separate organization and not mimic the Patriots and everything they did there. I am a little worried about that. But, you know, Josh McDaniels has been a head coach in the past. It didn't work out previously. He's OC'd in places different than New England before. He's with the Rams for 1 year. I think he can pull this off. I think. But I wouldn't expect the quickest turnaround in Las Vegas. I think the Raiders will be a middle-of-the-pack team next year. That's kind of what they've been for the past couple of years when they were with Gruden anyways. It's just a question, can they pull it off and can they actually make a significant run in the playoffs going forward? It'll be interesting. I am very interested to see how they fill out this coaching staff. Rich Bisaccia did a pretty good job with them, considering all the turmoil this team went through. I feel bad that he's not going to be around there more long-term because he did a really good job as an interim head coach just holding everything together when I felt like the world was falling apart and being able to get to the playoffs. So I do feel bad for him, but I do think it makes a lot of sense to not go with the interim head coach who coached half a season and going with someone like Josh McDaniels who's been in line for head coaching jobs in the past. And again, I'm not a huge fan of trying to mimic the Patriot way, so I hope that McDaniels and Ziegler have a different way of approaching this. They're not going to try to mimic the Patriots. They're going to try to build their own culture, with their own standards, and be unique and not try to mimic Bill Belichick, because otherwise I could see this going horribly wrong.